The Second Amendment, its origins, evolution, and ongoing debate. One man, one rifle, dozens of lives in the balance. On a quiet Sunday morning in Sutherland Springs, Texas, tragedy struck. 26 lives taken in a mass shooting. But one man, a plumber with an AR-15, stepped up when few others could. Stephen Willeford, hearing gunfire from his home, grabbed his legally owned AR-15 and rushed toward the danger. In the absence of police, he relied on his training and the protection granted by the Second Amendment to confront a killer. The attacker, armed with semi-automatic weapons, had already killed 26 people and wounded 20 others. Time was running out, but Willeford, a civilian with no military background, was ready. He exchanged gunfire with the shooter, taking cover behind a truck. In that moment, it wasn't just a weapon he carried. It was a responsibility, enshrined in the Second Amendment. A right to defend himself, his neighbors, and innocent lives. Willeford's actions forced the shooter to flee, ending the rampage. Law enforcement called him a hero, but to him, he was just a man exercising his constitutional right. The American Revolutionary War had ended, and the newly formed United States was facing an uncertain future. The Constitution aimed to provide a framework for governance, but many feared the rise of a central authority, one that could mirror the British monarchy they had just escaped. In the late 1700s, militia referred to ordinary citizens, farmers, blacksmiths, and shopkeepers, ready to defend their states. Unlike today's military, the militia was informal, yet vital to colonial defense. A militia wasn't just a structured force, it was the people themselves. Every able-bodied man was expected to have a firearm at the ready, not just for defense against foreign invaders, but to guard against a government that might one day seek to strip the people of their liberties. Having just overthrown the oppressive rule of King George III, the Founding Fathers wanted to ensure that the people could resist tyranny. That's why the Second Amendment mentions the importance of a well-regulated militia. James Madison, one of the chief architects of the Constitution, didn't initially believe a Bill of Rights was necessary. He thought the structure of the new government would naturally protect liberties better than a list of rights could. Madison called these parchment barriers, too easily ignored or reinterpreted. But due to pressure from anti-federalists like Patrick Henry and George Mason, Madison changed his stance. They were deeply concerned that without explicit protections, the government might become as tyrannical as the one they had just defeated. Patrick Henry worried that without amendments, the Constitution gave the federal government too much power, especially over the ability to disarm the militia. For him, this was a terrifying prospect. To secure Virginia's ratification of the Constitution, Madison promised to add amendments, not because he fully believed in them, but to ensure the Constitution would survive. When Madison presented the Second Amendment, it reflected his compromise with the anti-federalists and the importance of militias. It was deliberately written to protect the people's ability to defend themselves, not only from foreign threats, but from their own government. The Second Amendment begins with the phrase, "a well-regulated militia," being necessary to the security of a free state. But what did that mean in the 18th century, and how has it evolved? Militias in the 1700s weren't professional soldiers. They were everyday citizens, ready to defend their homes and communities in times of crisis. James Madison and many of the founders feared that a standing army could become a tool of oppression, like the British Army during colonial times. Militias were seen as defenders of liberty. Today, the U.S. has one of the most advanced militaries in the world, and many ask, does the idea of a well-regulated militia still apply? Some argue that the modern military has rendered citizen militias obsolete, but others believe that the people themselves are still the militia. There's a common misconception that the Second Amendment only protects an individual's right to own firearms. But the text references a well-regulated militia, which has led to deep debates. Some see the right as collective, others as individual. In District of Columbia v. Heller, 2008, the Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to own a firearm for self-defense within the home. In McDonald v. City of Chicago, 2010, the court extended the Second Amendment's protections to the state and local levels, ensuring its application across all states. In the years after the ratification of the Constitution, the Second Amendment was mostly tied to the idea of militias. But as the country evolved, so did the interpretation of this right. By the mid-1800s, courts began questioning whether the Second Amendment primarily protected militias, or if it also safeguarded an individual's right to own firearms. After the Civil War, Southern states passed laws known as Black Codes, aimed at disarming freed African Americans. This sparked debates about gun rights as a tool for self-defense and resistance to oppression. In District of Columbia v. Heller, 2008, the Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to own firearms for self-defense, independent of militia service. In Washington, D.C., strict gun control laws required firearms to be kept unloaded and disassembled, making them nearly useless for self-defense. Dick Heller challenged these laws, and in a 5-4 decision, the court ruled in his favor. Gun violence in the U.S. has reignited debates over the Second Amendment. Many Americans, including survivors of gun violence, argue that the Founding Fathers couldn't have predicted modern firearms like AR-15s. Gun control advocates often point out that the Second Amendment was written when muskets were the standard weapon. They believe the amendment should be updated to reflect modern realities. But many Americans, especially in rural areas, see the Second Amendment as essential to their personal freedom and security. For them, gun ownership is about self-defense and protecting their families from both criminals and government overreach. During the civil unrest of 2020, many gun owners expressed fear that without firearms, they wouldn't be able to protect their homes and businesses. For them, the Second Amendment is vital. The Founding Fathers, like Madison and Jefferson, believed that an armed populace could serve as the final check on government overreach. For many Americans, the Second Amendment is not just a historical relic, it's a vital part of their daily lives. Whether it's survivalists preparing for worst-case scenarios or concealed carriers protecting their families, this right provides a sense of security. In 2007, Jean Assam, a former police officer, used her legally carried firearm to stop a gunman at New Life Church in Colorado Springs. Her actions saved countless lives. In Federalist No. 46, James Madison argued that an armed populace would be a formidable force against any army trying to impose tyranny. This belief still resonates today. As we reflect on the Second Amendment, let's remember the words of Thomas Jefferson. The strongest reason for the people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is, as a last resort, to protect themselves against tyranny. The Second Amendment continues to be one of the most debated issues in America. Should it evolve with the times, or remain as the Founding Fathers intended, a cornerstone of personal liberty? What do you think? Should the Second Amendment be adapted to modern realities, or does it still stand as a vital defense against both crime and tyranny? Comment below and let us know your thoughts. The Founding Fathers couldn't have predicted AR-15s or mass shootings, but they also couldn't have predicted the resilience of the American people in protecting their freedoms. If you found this video insightful, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video, where we'll explore how a janitor's concealed carry saved lives during the Arapahoe High School shooting.